Book 3, The Architecture of Ruin, Chapter 1. The Deflated Continent. The arrival of Ane, the little magical horse, was usually a cause for cautious optimism in Bayou Saumur. She typically manifested in a flurry of sparkling vibrations, a flag unfurling in the humid breeze, bringing with her the scent of ozone and the promise of swift, equine justice. But on the night Janet the slime troll finally went into labor, Ane arrived not with a triumphant whinny, but with a sound like a wet cough. She was too late. The scene at the pond deep in the convent woods was a grotesque tableau, a freak occurrence even by the exceedingly loose standards of Saurel. Janet, the vast, shimmering continent of gelatinous emerald, was deflated. She looked like a discarded parade balloon, her slimy skin draped over the muddy banks in sad, wrinkled folds. The rhythmic, tectonic pulsing of her 26-month gestation had ceased. It was a flat line of the soul. And Casey, the Antichrist's cousin, the demonic cargo that had rearranged her organs alphabetically, was also dead. He lay beside her, a small, terrifyingly perfect torso attached to limbs that already looked too long, too knowing. He was covered in a thick, viscous fluid that smelled faintly of sulfur and colostrum, a tragic, unholy birth that had ended before it truly began. Dorothea, who had run through the thorny thickets of the blackberry bush upon hearing Janet's primal screams, fell to her knees in the mud. The camaraderie they had shared, a strange, unspoken bond forged over the high wire fence, was severed. It was a moment of profound, crushing grief, a grand canyon of sorrow that threatened to swallow her whole. But as the initial shock subsided, a cold, hard realization began to settle over the scene. This was not a natural death in childbirth. The bayou, for all its chaotic absurdity, had a certain rhythm, a consistency to its madness. This felt wrong. It felt deliberate. Clotilde, arriving moments later with her habit hitched up to her knees, surveyed the carnage with the clinical eye of a seasoned general. "This isn't right," she muttered, her voice tight. She pointed to a strange, rusted drain pipe protruding from the mud near Janet's deflated form. It hadn't been there yesterday. It looked like it had been violently shoved into the earth, a crude, metallic violation of the pond's natural ecosystem. And then there was the arrow. It was lodged deep in the trunk of the nearby pecan tree, its shaft vibrating slightly in the still air. It was a crude thing, fashioned from dark wood and tipped with what looked suspiciously like a shard of bone. A femur, perhaps, or a fragment of a skull. It was a stark, terrifying contradiction to the usual supernatural hazards of the town. This wasn't a ghost or a demon, this was a weapon. This was murder. Ralph the parrot, who had flown in to witness the tragedy, landed on the rusted drain pipe, his purple feather boa drooping sadly. He looked at the deflated slime troll, then at the dead demonic infant, and finally at the arrow. "Well, ain't this a kick in the cloaca?" Ralph squawked, his voice devoid of its usual manic energy. "The big green gal finally pops, and some dirtbag decides to play William Tell. It's a damn tragedy is what it is. A freak occurrence of the worst kind. You spend 26 months burping rosary beads, and this is the respect you get? A rusted pipe and a bone arrow? It's enough to make a bird want to take up a pacifier and crawl back into the egg." He paused, his beady eyes scanning the tree line. "I smell a rat. Or a rabid possum. Or maybe just a really pissed-off Dirty Harry wannabe with a penchant for archaic weaponry. This town is going to hell in a handbasket, and someone forgot to pack the crumpets." The news of Janet's death spread through Bayou Saint Mere like a dark stain on a white tablecloth. The town, usually so resilient in the face of the absurd, was genuinely shaken. Janet had been a fixture, a gross, burping, strangely comforting presence in the woods. Her death felt like a guillotine dropping on the town's collective innocence, a sharp, brutal severing of a familiar tie. The investigation, such as it was, fell to Clotilde and Dorothea. They cordoned off the pond with yellow caution tape they'd borrowed from Elias Brigsby's hardware store, treating the area with the grim respect of a crime scene. They examined the drain pipe, finding traces of a strange, iridescent powder inside. They studied the arrow, noting the intricate, almost ritualistic carvings on the bone tip. It was baffling, a puzzling mystery that seemed to point toward a darker, more organized threat than the usual chaotic manifestations of the gate. "It's like someone was trying to drain her," Clotilde observed, her brow furrowed as she poked at the rusted pipe with a stick.
"Oh." "Pump something in. And the arrow... that's a warning."
A very clear, very sharp warning. Dorothea nodded, her face pale. The guilt she had carried over her secret wish for an abortion now felt like a physical weight, a torso of lead strapped to her chest. She had wanted the pregnancy to end, but not like this, never like this. The sight of the dead infant, the colostrum drying on its unnatural skin, was an image that would haunt her forever. "We need to find out who did this," Dorothea said, her voice hard. "We need to find them, and we need to make them pay, with respect, of course, but mostly with extreme prejudice." As they stood by the ruined pond, the air grew thick with a sense of foreboding. The face plants in the distant grove remained silent, but it was a heavy, expectant silence, the kind that precedes a storm. The death of Janet the slime troll was not an ending, it was a beginning, a dark, bloody overture to a new symphony of chaos. And somewhere in the shadows, the architect of this ruin was watching, waiting for the next movement to begin. In the days following the grim discovery at the pond, a profound internal shift occurred within Dorothea. The grief, the guilt, and the sheer, unadulterated horror of Janet's murder acted as a strange, therapeutic catalyst. She had spent months navigating the complex emotional terrain of her unexpected fatherhood, accepting the he/him pronouns as a badge of her bizarre new reality. But standing over the deflated remains of the slime troll, she realized that the masculine armor no longer fit. It felt like a costume, a contradiction to the raw, maternal grief that was tearing her apart. She sat Gumbo down in the bonsai garden, the air thick with the scent of pine and impending emotional disclosure. "Gumbo," she said, her voice steady but rough around the edges. "I'm going back to she, to her. It's who I am. The father thing, the Casey thing, it was a freak occurrence, a cosmic joke. But I'm a woman. I'm your wife, and I need to be her again." Gumbo, his compass needle wrists twitching faintly toward the south, simply nodded. He reached out and took her hand, his ancient eyes filled with a deep, quiet understanding. "You are who you are, Dottie," he murmured. "The bayou changes a lot of things, but it don't change the roots. She, her, him, you're still my heart." It was a moment of profound camaraderie, a quiet victory in a world that seemed increasingly determined to tear them apart. Dorothea felt a weight lift, a small but significant reclamation of her own identity amidst the swirling chaos. But while Dorothea was finding her footing, Cora was losing hers entirely. It started subtly a tightness in her clothes, a sudden, insatiable craving for franken beans and cinnamon rolls. But within weeks, the weight gain accelerated at a terrifying supernatural pace. It wasn't normal fat. It was a dense, heavy mass that seemed to materialize out of thin air, anchoring her to the earth with a gravitational pull that defied physics. Soon she could no longer navigate the stairs to the malt shop. Then she could no longer leave the apartment above the music shop. She became entirely homebound, a prisoner in her own body. The apartment, once a cozy haven, transformed into a strange, claustrophobic world. The air grew thick and stagnant, permeated by an old 70s cigarette-like smell that seemed to seep from the very plaster and particle board of the walls. The popcorn ceiling above her bed seemed to undulate, a slow, rhythmic breathing that mirrored her own labored gasps. Sean, still recovering from his own manic episode, tried desperately to care for her. He brought her meals, changed the dirty dishes, and tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. But the situation was overwhelming. Cora's cravings became increasingly bizarre. She demanded porridge mixed with chapstick and insisted on eating it with Cheeto-stained fingers. She would spend hours staring at an old-time magazine, muttering about Karen Carpenter and the dangers of bulimia, her mind seemingly disassociating from the reality of her own expanding form. Bizarre phenomena began to plague the apartment. The air vents whispered cryptic messages in a language that sounded like a mix of ancient Sumerian and 90s rap. A dead bird appeared on the windowsill every morning, its neck snapped at a precise, unnatural angle. Sean found an old steamer trunk in the closet that he swore hadn't been there before, filled with strange, unsettling objects. A collection of cracked glasses, a rusted belly chain, and a treasure chest full of what looked like human teeth. Cora's paranoia grew. She became convinced that the water moccasins from the bayou were slithering through the plumbing, waiting to strike. She demanded Sean install tiki torches around the bed to ward off evil spirits, and insisted he wear a pair of angel wings she'd fashioned from discarded feathers in garbage bags whenever he entered the room. "It's the vaccine, Sean," she would cry, her voice a panicked wheeze. "They put something in the water. It's making me grow. It's a freak occurrence, a cosmic punishment for my sins." Sean, his own grip on reality tenuous at best, tried to soothe her. "It's okay, Cora. It's just a phase. We'll figure it out. We'll find a balance." But he knew it was a lie. There was no balance in Bayou St. Mere. There was only the relentless, crushing weight of the absurd. He felt like he was living in a nightmare, a twisted sitcom where the punchlines were all tragedies. He'd find himself staring at the popcorn ceiling, wondering if it was going to collapse and crush them both. He'd look at Cora, her once vibrant face now lost in folds of flesh, her Cheeto-stained fingers clutching a stuffed animal she'd named Mr. Rogers, and he'd feel a profound, terrifying sense of helplessness. The apartment had become a tomb, a skyscraper of despair built on a foundation of particle board and paranoia. And as Cora continued to expand, a silent, immobile monument to the town's cruelty, Sean realized that the true horror of Bayou St. Mere wasn't the monsters in the woods. It was the monsters that grew inside the people you loved. As Cora's apartment became a bizarre, expanding universe of its own, the supernatural alarm bells of Bayou St. Mere began to ring with an urgency that even the most jaded resident couldn't ignore. The death of Janet the slime troll, a creature whose very existence was a testament to the town's resilience, had sent ripples through the fabric of reality, and the entities that guarded Saurel's strange equilibrium were not pleased. In the museum, the talking moosehead, usually content with delivering dry, academic pronouncements on the history of taxidermy, began to speak in frantic, guttural warnings. Professor Voss, Loon, and Merrick gathered around it, their faces pale in the dim light of the exhibit hall. The moosehead's eyes, usually glassy and inert, now glowed with an internal malevolent light. "The Grand Canyon of Truth has opened," it bellowed, its voice echoing through the old smelling building. "A missing child, a crib death. The fortune cookie has been cracked, and the message is dire. The El Paso of the soul is upon us. There is no balance, no consistency. Only the garbage of broken promises. It then let out a series of mournful groans that sounded suspiciously like Karen Carpenter attempting to sing punk rock. Simultaneously, in the secret mirror room, Concepcion appeared to Clotilde and Gumbo. She materialized not in her usual stoic form, but agitated, her afro crackling with static electricity, her snakeskin boots tapping a frantic rhythm on the cold granite floor. Her message, delivered in a rapid-fire torrent of Spanish and Creole, was urgent and laced with her trademark anger. "Fiddle-dee-dee," she spat, her eyes flashing. "This is no time for moronic pleasantries. There is a guillotine hanging over this town. A shadow with an AK-47 and a penchant for Dirty Harry tactics. The shaking baby syndrome of the universe is upon us. They want the colostrum. They want the pacifier. They want to deliberately ruin everything. You must find the vaccine. You must find the drain pipe. You must find the treasure chest before it's too late." She then dissolved into a cloud of mauve and burnt sienna smoke, leaving behind only the lingering scent of ozone and a single, perfectly formed fortune cookie. Claude, ever practical, picked up the fortune cookie. It read, "Beware the man with Cheeto-stained fingers." She looked at Gumbo, whose compass needle wrists were spinning wildly, pointing in every conceivable direction at once. "Well," Clotilde said, her voice dry, "that narrows it down to half the male population of Saurel. Amidst this rising tension, Chaos's relationship with Supamakla Keda Masakapakada Napuputiti Kaka. Jones deepened. Their love, a strange, tender bloom in the humid chaos of Saurel, was a stark contrast to the encroaching darkness. They found solace in each other, a quiet privacy amidst the public spectacle of the town's unraveling. One evening, after a particularly intense session of Baby Germain Jr., quoting ancient philosophers in a voice that could shatter glass, Chaos and Supamakla Keda Masakapa Kadina Puputita Kaka were sitting on the porch of the little blue house, sharing a plate of crumpets and porridge. Supamaklikata Masakapa Kadina Puputiti Kaka, with a mischievous glint in her sightless eyes, reached out and gently squeezed Chaos's thigh. "You know, Chaos," she purred, her voice a low, melodic hum, "for a man who carries the weight of the universe on his shoulders, you're remarkably well-equipped. I've always been drawn to men with a certain gravitas, a certain... and yours, my dear, is quite substantial." She then leaned in, her lips brushing his ear, and whispered, "Let's just say, your Frankenbeans are less tinker toys and more underground Cheeto-stained fingers. A true sky-rise of pleasure, if you will. It's enough to give a girl paranoia." Chaos, usually unflappable, blushed a deep cinnamon red. He stammered, trying to find a witty retort, but his mind was a blank. He was used to compliments about his telekinetic abilities, his quick wit, his ability to change a dirty diaper without gagging. But this was new. This was a different kind of respect. He felt a strange mix of embarrassment and profound satisfaction. He knew, in that moment, that he was truly, deeply in love. And in Bayou St. Mere, that was a dangerous, beautiful thing. He thought of the dirty dishes and dirty diapers that awaited him inside, a stark contrast to the ethereal beauty of Supamaklakata Masakapakadi Napuputiti Kaka's words. He even imagined a bonfire of his past insecurities, burning brightly in the night, leaving behind only the pure, unadulterated joy of their connection. He knew that their love, like everything else in Bayou St. Mere, was a riddle wrapped in an enigma, but it was a riddle he was determined to solve. He thought of the chalk outline of his past, the mistakes he had made, the lessons he had learned. He knew that he was no longer the boy who had once been lost, but a man who was finding his way, one strange, beautiful step at a time. He even found himself humming a faint, almost inaudible tune. A melody that sounded suspiciously like Baby Baby by Amy Grant, the between-state signal, a subtle reminder that even in the most mundane moments, the supernatural was always lurking, always waiting to reveal itself. He was ready. He was chaos, and he was in love. And in Bayou St. Mere, that was a dangerous, beautiful thing. He thought of the El Paso of his soul, a vast, open landscape where anything was possible, where love could bloom even in the most unlikely of places. He thought of the Grand Canyon of their future, a vast, unexplored territory, filled with both wonder and peril. He knew that their journey would be long, but he was ready to face it, hand in hand with Supamaklakata Masakapakadanapuputa Kaka Jones, the woman who saw him, truly saw him, in all his chaotic, well-endowed glory. The investigation into Janet's death, a task that would have sent lesser mortals into a spiral of existential dread, was handled by Clotilde with her usual blend of grim determination and pragmatic exasperation. The initial crime scene, now a chalk outline of what once was, yielded little beyond the obvious signs of foul play. The rusted drain pipe had been removed, its iridescent residue sent to Professor Voss for analysis, who, in turn, was already muttering about ancient elemental forces and the subtle influence of El Paso on Bayou St. Mere's subterranean water table. The bone arrow remained a chilling testament to a deliberate, malicious act, a stark contrast to the usual chaotic, often accidental weirdness of Saurel. Dorothea, now firmly back in her she/her pronouns, found a strange, almost therapeutic release in the pursuit of justice. The grief for Janet, the guilt over her own past wishes, had transmuted into a fierce, protective anger. She worked tirelessly alongside Clotilde, her sharp mind cutting through the town's usual obfuscations. She even found herself, on occasion, offering a small cash gift to the local children who brought them snippets of gossip from the alley behind the malt shop, or tales of strange figures lurking near the bizarre bus stop. The camaraderie between her and Clotilde, forged in the crucible of shared absurdity, deepened with each baffling clue. They were a formidable pair, a balance of spiritual and practical, a consistency in a world that offered none. Meanwhile, Cora's apartment above the music shop had become a veritable museum of the bizarre. Her weight gain had stabilized, leaving her a monumental, immobile presence, a living, breathing mattress of flesh. The popcorn ceiling still seemed to breathe, the air vents still whispered secrets, and the pervasive old 70s cigarette-like smell clung to everything like a second skin. Sean, now a master of the dirty dishes and dirty diapers that accumulated with alarming speed, moved through the apartment with the weary grace of a man who had long since surrendered to the absurd. He'd even found a colony of lice in Cora's hair, a testament to the apartment's increasingly feral ecosystem, which he treated with a mixture of dread and a surprisingly effective concoction of milk and raw egg. Cora, her mind a swirling vortex of paranoia and forgotten pop culture references, spent her days watching old movies, convinced that every plot twist was a direct commentary on her own predicament. She'd occasionally demand a fortune cookie, only to throw it across the room in a fit of pique if the message wasn't sufficiently profound. "It's all a riddle," she'd wail, her voice muffled by the folds of her flesh. "A cosmic riddle, and I'm the missing child." Sean, ever patient, would gently wipe the Cheeto-stained fingers that perpetually adorned her hands, a silent testament to her ongoing, inexplicable cravings. Chaos, however, remained a beacon of relative normalcy amidst the encroaching madness. His relationship with Supamaklakata Masakapakadina Puputiti Kaka Jones continued to blossom, a strange, tender bloom in the humid chaos. He found himself increasingly drawn to her quiet strength, her ability to navigate the world with a grace that defied her blindness. He'd even started carrying a small, worn chapstick in his pocket, a subtle nod to her insistence on proper self-care, even in the face of impending doom. He knew that their love, like everything else in Bayou Saint Mere, was a riddle wrapped in an enigma, but it was a riddle he was determined to solve. He even found himself humming a faint, almost inaudible tune, a melody that sounded suspiciously like "Baby, Baby" by Amy Grant, the between-state signal. A subtle reminder that even in the most mundane moments, the supernatural was always lurking, always waiting to reveal itself. He was ready. He was chaos. Book 3, The Architecture of Ruin, Chapter 2, The Unraveling Thread. Cora's apartment, once a vibrant, if slightly cluttered, testament to her sweet-natured chaos, had become a monument to the relentless, everlasting expansion of both her physical form and the bizarre phenomena that now clung to her like a second skin. Confined to a reinforced wheelchair that groaned under her monumental weight, she navigated the increasingly cramped space with the slow, deliberate movements of a beached whale. The popcorn ceiling, once a benign architectural detail, now seemed to undulate with a life of its own, shedding flakes of plaster like dandruff from a giant's scalp. The air vents no longer merely circulated air. They whispered secrets in a language that sounded suspiciously like 90s rap, punctuated by the occasional, unsettling belching sound. An old 70s cigarette-like smell, thick and cloying, permeated the plaster and particle board walls, a scent that Sean, bless his long-suffering heart, had long since ceased to notice. It was amidst this domestic surrealism that Cora found the clue. It wasn't a grand, dramatic discovery, but a small, unassuming object that had fallen from the folds of her vast, floral housecoat. It was a button, not just any button, but one made of polished bone, intricately carved with a symbol she didn't recognize. A stylized arrow piercing a tiny, weeping eye. It was a flabbergasting detail, a tiny shard of the outside world that had somehow found its way into her hermetically sealed existence. She turned it over in her Cheeto-stained fingers, a momentary flicker of clarity cutting through the foggy glow of her perpetual dissociation. "Sean," she wheezed, her voice a strained whisper. "Law." Sean, who had been attempting to coax a reluctant stuffed animal, a particularly bedraggled Mr. Rogers doll, into a tiny sunroof he'd installed in the ceiling for. Therapeutic light exposure. Paused. He took the button, his brow furrowed. "Where did you get this, Cora?" "It just appeared," she murmured, her eyes drifting back to the undulating popcorn ceiling. "Like a special delivery from the underground." Later that day, with the button clutched in her hand, Cora was wheeled down to the pale yellow house, a journey that now required the combined efforts of Sean, Youngblood, and a specially modified mop handle for leverage. Dorothea, now firmly back in her she/her pronouns, and Clotilde, her habit crisp and her gaze as sharp as ever, examined the button with a mixture of professional curiosity and profound unease. The bone was old, smooth, and bore the unmistakable marks of careful, almost ritualistic carving. It was a contradiction to the crude, bone-tipped arrow found at Janet's pond, yet undeniably linked. "This is no ordinary button," Clotilde declared, holding it up to the light. "This is a secret ingredient, a breadcrumb on a very dark trail." Dorothea, her face etched with a new grim determination, nodded. "It's a message. A Dear John letter from the killer, perhaps. Or a clue. It's baffling, but it's a lead." The button, as if imbued with a will of its own, seemed to hum faintly, pulling them towards the convent grounds. Their first stop, the faceplant grove. The grove, usually a place of unsettling whispers and occasional cryptic pronouncements, was eerily silent. The tiny human faces on the plants were puckered, their puckered eyelashes fluttering in a breeze that wasn't there. They looked deaf and dumb, their usual chatter replaced by a profound, silent day. "They're scared," Youngblood whispered, his hand resting on a particularly withered faceplant. "Something has them shaken. Something has them helpless." Suddenly, one of the larger faceplants, its features contorted in a grimace of effort, began to speak. Its voice was a dry, rustling sound, like leaves skittering across pavement, and it spoke in a language that was definitely no English. It was a series of guttural clicks and whistles, a language as old as the bayou itself. Youngblood. His eyes closed in. Concentration translated. His voice hushed. "It says, 'Gobble, goblin. Loose as a goose. Where the vaginal folds meet the uncharted, a musty scent of taints and centuries, a light year's journey. Orphan, bearing chains of mighty self-control, where the depth is turned on and the truth is perennial. Go to the place of faithful pruning. The veneer of peace is a ruin. Beware the leftover, the nastained, the floodwaters. The practice makes perfect the faithful, the unity. The crescendo, the nothing to fear, the future is here, open the door, the fandango, the fruity, the sexist, the jeweled dildo, the tuning fork, the guardian, the droughts, the sublime, the lingering, the marching, the fi. The which is spelled, the unexplained, the momentary, the continuous constant laugh, the which is spelled, the unexplained, the body aching, the temporary, the towing, the worrisome, the heaven's gate, the knocking floor out of this world, the outrageous, the astonished, the uncontained, the gobble, the driving, the legally insane, the walking around circles, the astonished, the uncontained, the gobble, goblin, the taints, the faithful, the breadcrumbs, the secret ingredient, the uncharted, the musty, the taints, the faithful, the pruning, the veneer, the puckered eyelashes, the deaf and dumb, the ruin, the dear John letters, the belching, the recalling, the painful, the sunroof, the shackles, the tackling, the overwhelming, the painful, the sunroof, the antibiotics, the enigmatic, the troublesome, the deafening, the crunching, the fibbing, the beware, the declared, the tainted, the rebellious, the fumes, the lost as a goose, the goblin, the harsh truth, the cotton, the rebellious, the fumes, the track marks, the terrible moaning, the begging, the screaming, the streaking, the pleading, the bowing, the shouting, the bowing, the church group, weeping, the bawling, the vomiting, the panic, the disbelief, the rasta, the church group, the special delivery, the basket of yarn, the cash box, the opera, the mop handle, the Sacagawea, the Harriet Tubman on the down low. Youngblood finished, looking utterly drained. "It's a lot. But the key seems to be the place of faithful pruning. And the jeweled dildo? I'm not sure about that part." Cloddled, ever unflappable, merely raised an eyebrow. "The bayou has its own metaphors, Youngblood. And sometimes they're just plain sexist, or fruity, or both. But faithful pruning, that sounds like the bonsai garden. And the uncharted and musty taints, that sounds like the storage shed. We have 2 more stops." As they left the grove, a strange symbol, almost imperceptible, seemed to shimmer on the weathered bark of a cypress tree. A stylized arrow piercing a tiny weeping eye, identical to the one on Cora's button. The flabbergasting trail was indeed uncharted, and the path ahead was shrouded in a foggy glow of uncertainty. But for Dorothea and Clotilde, the pursuit of justice, however baffling and puzzling, was now their mighty self-control. their guardian against the encroaching ruin of Bayou Saint Mere. The centuries of weirdness, the light years of absurdity, had all led to this moment, a momentary suspended breath before the next plunge into the sublime and the troublesome. They were astonished, yet uncontained, ready to face whatever enigmatic horrors awaited them. The air was thick with the scent of rebellious fumes, a silent warning of the deafening crunching that was yet to come. They knew they were walking around circles of madness, but they were doing it with purpose, with a continuous, constant laugh bubbling just beneath the surface of their grim determination. They were carrying the weight of Janet's death, marching towards an overwhelming truth, their bodies aching with the effort, yet their spirits unexplainedly resilient. They were, in their own way, legally insane, but in Bayou Saint Mere, that was just another Tuesday. Their next destination was the storage shed, a rickety structure behind the call center that smelled perpetually of mildew and forgotten dreams. Inside, amidst piles of discarded tinker toys and dusty dividers in a cubicle, they found another clue. It was a small wooden box, intricately carved, and when Dorothea opened it, a faint, nostalgic scent of cinnamon and burnt sienna wafted out. Inside, nestled on a bed of dried Spanish moss, was a single, perfectly preserved, puckered eyelashes. It was a secret ingredient, a tiny, unsettling detail that seemed to hum with a strange, enigmatic energy. Attached to it was a faded, handwritten note, written in a regional script that was almost illegible. Youngblood, after much squinting, deciphered it. It says, "The truth is a blooming perennial, found where the leftover stained floodwaters recede, and the practice makes perfect, of faithful unity, reaches its crescendo in the heaven's gate of the blind school. And then beware the declared tainted, uncharted secret ingredients, lest you become lost as a goose to the goblin of harsh truth, and the cotton of rebellious fumes, and the track marks of terrible moaning, begging, screaming, streaking, pleading, bawling, shouting, weeping, bawling, panic, disbelief, the Rasta, the church group, the special, delivery, the basket of yarn, the cash box, the opera, the mop handle, the Sacagawea, the Harriet Tubman on the down low, the Mai, Pandora, the crying, the wounds, the hopping a train, and someone being tied to the railroad tracks." "It's a lot," Clotilde sighed. "Indeed, Youngblood, it's a lot. But it seems our next stop is the bonsai garden. And then the blind school. This killer certainly enjoys a good scavenger hunt, and a good fandango of words." As they left the shed, a strange symbol, almost imperceptible, seemed to shimmer on the weathered wood of the door, a stylized arrow piercing a tiny weeping eye identical to the one on Cora's button. The flabbergasting trail was indeed uncharted, and the path ahead was shrouded in a foggy glow of uncertainty. Book 3, Chapter 3. The Unveiling of the Unholy Truth. The morning after the great porcine invasion, Bayou Saint Mere resembled a surrealist painting left out in the rain. The convent grounds were a patchwork of mud, shattered tiki torches, and the lingering, pungent aroma of roasted pork and ozone. The air hummed with a nervous energy, a collective, town-wide vibration that felt like a subwoofer cranked to maximum capacity, rattling the very fillings in their teeth. It was a bizarre incident, even by Sauerel's standards, a breakout scene from a nightmare that had somehow spilled over into the waking world. The town was gathering its wits, honoring its dead, and trying desperately to ignore the fact that the universe seemed to be playing a very long, very cruel joke on them. The soft fires of the previous night's destruction still smoldered on the quiet ridge near the faceplant grove, casting a peeling, sickly light over the devastation. The proximity of such violence had left everyone feeling exposed, their plain Jane existence shattered beyond repair. Gumbo, ever the stoic anchor in the storm, was quietly raking up leaves and debris in the bonsai garden. His movements were methodical, a therapeutic rhythm that seemed to soothe the frazzled nerves of the surviving plants. He was a man who found solace in the tangible, in the dirt beneath his fingernails and the quiet resilience of nature. As he knelt to inspect a particularly battered juniper, his compass needle wrists twitched violently, pointing not north, but directly toward a hidden window box beneath the sill of the pale yellow house. It was a spot he had overlooked 100 times, a blind spot in his usually meticulous care. With a gentle, almost reverent touch, Gumbo pried the box open. Inside, nestled among dried moss and what looked suspiciously like a dead mink, was a secret stash. It was a collection of items so incongruous, so utterly baffling, that for a moment Gumbo simply stared, his mind struggling to process the implications. There was a crumpled receipt from a no-tell motel in Slidell, Louisiana, dated for the exact night of Janet's murder. There was a small, intricately carved wooden figurine, identical to the one the killer had carried in Cora's vision. And there was a handwritten note, scrawled on the back of a report card from a local GED program, detailing a private Basha clandestine meeting that shattered everything they thought they knew. The receipt bore Elias Brigsby's name, but the signature at the bottom was not his. It was a flamboyant, looping scrawl that belonged to someone else entirely. Someone they all knew. Someone they all trusted. It was the signature of Father O'Malley, the seemingly innocuous town elder who ran the church banquet hall and organized the annual raffle tickets for the Christian couples retreat. The note detailed a complex scheme, a web of lying and deceit designed to frame Brigsby and throw the investigation off the scent. It spoke of a cleansing, a quelling of the unnatural, and a raising of a new, purer order. It was a manifesto of madness, written by a man they had all idolizing as a pillar of the community. Gumbo's breath hitched. The betrayal was absolute. It was a trapdoor opening beneath their feet, a ladder leading into the attic of a nightmare they hadn't even known existed. The alibi was a fake, a meticulously constructed ruse, aided by a man who preached forgiveness while orchestrating murder. The realization hit Gumbo like a physical blow, a rug burn on his soul. He felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to start digging through dumpsters, to unearth every dirty secret this town had ever buried. The bacterial infection of deceit had spread further than any of them could have imagined. He carried the box to Clotilde and Dorothea, who were sitting on the porch of the convent, their faces drawn and pale. When he laid the contents before them, the silence that followed was deafening. It was the silence of a world ending, of a reality crumbling into dust. Dorothea stared at the receipt, her eyes wide, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The initial rage she had felt toward Brigsby, a rage that had sustained her through the darkest hours, now mutated into something colder, something far more dangerous. It was a colossus of fury, a Ramses of retribution rising from the depths of her soul. She had been fooling herself, dwelling on the wrong enemy. The true monster had been hiding in plain sight, serving shrimp gumbo and Mexican cornbread at the church banquet, smiling benignly while his hands were stained with blood. "O'Malley," she whispered, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. "He helped him. He gave him the alibi. He's part of it." Her voice was a low, dangerous moaning, a sound that made Clotilde shiver. Dorothea felt a sudden violent urge to start throwing battery acid in somebody's face, to inflict the same pain she was feeling. She was sliding into a dark, uncharted territory, her mind a patchwork of violent fantasies. She imagined O'Malley's eyes gouged out, his smug face twisted in agony. She was turning away from the light, embracing the shadows. Clotilde, her faith shaken to its core, crossed herself, her fingers trembling. This is a major betrayal, a crisis center level emergency. How could we have been so blind? We were judging Brigsby while the real devil was serving us communion. She looked at the wooden figurine, her expression one of profound disgust. This is a bizarre incident, even for us. It's like finding a bird feeder with strange things in itu. Know it's wrong, but you can't look away. Cora, sitting quietly in her wheelchair in the corner of the porch, watched the scene unfold with a strange, detached calm. Her remote viewing had shown her the truth, but she had kept it hidden, a silent observer to the town's unraveling. She remembered the vision of the killer's wrist, the tattoo of the arrow in the Mr. Rogers doll. It hadn't been Brigsby's wrist. It had been O'Malley's. The realization clicked into place, justifying the bizarre imagery of her vision. The secret society ruse they had suspected was just that, a ruse, a smokescreen created by O'Malley to distract them. She felt a pang of guilt for her underachieving silence, but also a strange sense of validation. Her visions were real. They were the only truth left in this town of lies. "He was eating with us," Dorothea hissed, her hands clenching into fists. "He was offering us comfort while he was planning her murder. He's a short-order cook of death, serving up tragedy with a smile." She stood up, her movements jerky, propelled by a nervous energy that was terrifying to behold. "I'm going to find him. I'm going to find him, and I'm going to make him pay." "Dorothea, wait," Clotilde urged, reaching out a hand. "We need to be smart about this. We need to go to the police. We can't just go diving into this without a plan." "The police?" Dorothea laughed, a harsh, grating sound that held no humor. "The police in this town are probably trying to use a sovereign citizen routine on a cop to get out of a ticket. They're useless. This is personal. This is about Janet. This is about Casey." She turned away, her eyes blazing with a religious ecstasy of vengeance. "I'm going to be the executioner. I'm the head honcho now." She stormed off the porch, leaving Clotilde and Gumbo in stunned silence. The air felt heavy, pregnant with the promise of more violence. The soft fires on the ridge seemed to flare up, reflecting the inferno raging within Dorothea's soul. The town of Bayou St. Mere, already battered and bruised, was about to face its greatest trial yet. The AK-47 of fate was loaded, and Dorothea's finger was on the trigger. The game room of their lives had turned deadly serious, and the stakes were nothing less than their very souls. The sourdough bread of their existence had gone sour, and the white Russian of their peace was spiked with poison. The mulatto community, the plain Jane folks, everyone was about to be caught in the crossfire. The vacation house of their sanity was burning down, and there was no lake house to escape to. The Christian counselor couldn't save them now. The tampon string of their patience had snapped. The tin foil hats couldn't protect them from this reality. The pesos of their goodwill were spent. The pros of living in Saurel were rapidly being outweighed by the cons. The slavery to their own bizarre reality was complete. The meat plants of their nightmares were working overtime. The killing had only just begun. Dorothea's descent was not a gradual slide, but a sudden, violent plunge into the abyss. The revelation of Father O'Malley's complicity had snapped something vital within her, severing the last fragile threads of her sanity. She felt a bacterial infection of rage spreading through her soul, a virulent strain that consumed all reason. Her once gentle demeanor was replaced by a feral intensity. Her eyes, usually soft and expressive, now burned with a cold, hard light. She began to crouch in shadows, her movements furtive, like a predator stalking its prey. She was diving into conspiracy theories, convinced that O'Malley's betrayal was merely the tip of a much larger, more sinister iceberg. She saw symbols everywhere, Even in the mundane, her mind a patchwork of paranoia and delusion. The floors made of pennies in the old general store seemed to shimmer with hidden messages, and the bird feeder with strange things in it outside her window became a surveillance device, its occupants whispering secrets only she could hear. She was eating nothing but Mexican cornbread and sourdough bread, convinced that the fermented grains held some ancient, forgotten power, a secret ingredient that would unlock the universe's mysteries. She was fooling herself, of course, but in her deranged state, she believed she was gathering evidence, meticulously piecing together the fragments of a cosmic puzzle. Her transformation was complete when she acquired the AK-47. It wasn't a purchase, but a discovery, a divine intervention in her twisted narrative. She found it in a forgotten corner of the convent's attic, hidden beneath a pile of dusty vestments and a collection of Kathy comics. It was a relic from a bygone era, a souvenir from a particularly zealous missionary trip, perhaps. The cold, hard steel felt strangely comforting in her hands, an extension of her burgeoning fury. She began to puffing out her chest, her posture straightening, her voice deepening. She was no longer Dorothea, the gentle, confused soul. She was the executioner, the head honcho, the instrument of divine retribution. She felt a surge of religious ecstasy, a perverse sense of purpose that justified every violent thought, every murderous impulse. She was raising the stakes, sliding into pure madness, turning away from any semblance of her former self. She was quelling any last vestiges of doubt, her mind a singular, unwavering laser beam of vengeance. Her initial target, despite Gumbo's revelation, remained Brigsby. He was the tangible enemy, the familiar villain, and her mind, fractured as it was, clung to the comfort of that familiar hatred. She went on the trail, her mind a whirlwind of dream interpretation and no glove, no love fantasies of revenge. She saw symbols everywhere, even in the semen stains on the floor of an abandoned vacation house near the lake. She was convinced these were clues, breadcrumbs left by a cosmic conspirator, guiding her toward her destiny. She was underachieving in her grasp of reality, voting for chaos, crouching in the shadows of her own delusion. She was diving headfirst into the abyss, convinced she was merely seeking justice. Meanwhile, Brigsby, blissfully unaware of the new developments, continued his darkly comedic battle with lung cancer. He was found in his apartment, attempting to use a sovereign citizen routine on a cop to get out of a ticket for jaywalking, a testament to his enduring, if misguided, sense of self-importance. He was also trying to build a sand castle in his living room, meticulously crafting turrets and moats from a mixture of beach sand and his own phlegm. He delivered another monologue, this one about the absurdity of his impending death, the irony of being wrongly accused while genuinely dying, and the profound injustice of having to pay for parking. He was reading Kathy comics, his face illuminated by the flickering glow of a tin foil hat he wore to ward off extraterrestrial cancer cells. He was trying to win raffle tickets for a Christian couple's retreat, convinced that a weekend of forced intimacy and lukewarm coffee would cure his spiritual malaise. He even had a Christian counselor on speed dial, a perpetually flustered woman who believed his lung cancer was a result of his unconfessed sins. He was a man adrift, clinging to the flotsam and jetsam of his own peculiar reality, a plain Jane existence made extraordinary by his own self-delusion. Dorothea's rage finally boiled over. The first shots rang out at the church banquet hall where Father O'Malley was presiding over a particularly bland shrimp gumbo and fried brain cells fundraiser. The bullets ripped through the bamboo bridge leading to the stage, sending the one-man band scrambling for cover. Miraculously, no one was seriously hurt, thanks to a series of darkly comedic near misses. A bullet ricocheted off a subwoofer, sending a potbelly pig mascot tumbling into a vat of lukewarm white Russian. Another round narrowly missed a woman's head, instead gouging out the eyes of a taxidermied daddy-long-legs spider on the wall. Dorothea, her face a mask of deranged glee, continued her rampage, her laughter echoing through the cavernous hall. She was killing her past, lying to herself about her motives, and idolizing her own distorted sense of justice. She was moaning with fury, nudging herself further into the abyss, offering a grotesque spectacle of vengeance. Her rampage continued through the streets of Bayou Saint-Mere. She shot at the call center, sending the newly installed Colossus and Ramses statues crumbling to the ground. She shot at the blind school, the bullets pinging off the old brick, sending the students and teachers scrambling for cover. She even shot at the park encyclopedia, convinced it held some hidden truth, its pages exploding in a flurry of shredded paper. The town was in a state of utter pandemonium, a crisis hotline ringing off the hook with desperate pleas for help. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and fear, a first stink bug of terror that permeated every corner of their lives. The very ground seemed to vibrate with the intensity of her rage, a tantrum of violence that threatened to consume them all. Then she encountered the feral pigs. They were more ravenous than ever, their eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger, their grunts echoing through the streets like a German sea shanty sung by a choir of demons. In a grotesque John Waters-esque battle, Dorothea slaughtered them with the AK-47, their squeals mixing with her deranged laughter. The scene was violent but also darkly humorous, a sock puppet show of carnage, a particularly aggressive so, its snout covered in what looked suspiciously like aftershave, charged her, only to be met with a hail of bullets. The pig collapsed, its body twitching, its last breath a mournful squeal. Dorothea stood amidst the carnage, her chest heaving, the AK-47 still smoking in her hands. She was a figure of terrifying beauty, a goddess of destruction, her face smeared with mud and pig's blood. She had quelling the pig threat, but at what cost? She was dwelling in a new kind of madness, a place where the lines between justice and vengeance had blurred beyond recognition. She was raising a new flag, a banner of chaos, sliding into a role she had never imagined. She was turning the tide, but towards what unknown shore? The town was in a state of religious ecstasy, a perverse celebration of violence, a firing squad of fear. The tampon string of their sanity was stretched to its breaking point. The pesos of their peace were gone. The pros of living in Saurel were rapidly being outweighed by the cons. The slavery to their own bizarre reality was complete. The meat plants of their nightmares were working overtime. The killing had only just begun. The rug burn of her past was now a gaping wound, and she was ready to tear the world apart to heal it. She was a fry cook in the inferno of her own making, serving up a dish of pure, unadulterated rage. The Frico of her mind was working overtime, churning out new ways to inflict pain. She was a mink in a cage, lashing out at anything that came near. She was the first stink bug of a new plague, a harbinger of doom. She was the sock puppet of her own madness, dancing to a tune only she could hear. She was a tantrum personified, a force of nature unleashed. She was a bacterial infection of the soul, spreading rapidly, consuming everything in its path. She was religious ecstasy gone wrong, a perversion of faith. She was Colossus and Ramses combined, a destructive force of biblical proportions. She was the executioner, the head honcho, the firing squad, all rolled into one. She was the AK-47 itself, a weapon of mass destruction. She was the breakout scene of their despair, the tampon string of their sanity, the tin foil of their delusion, the pesos of their destruction, the pros of their downfall, the patchwork of their broken dreams, the peeling layers of their reality, the vacation house of their peace, the lake house of their sorrow, the Christian couple's retreat of their damnation, the Christian counselor of their despair. She was the embodiment of all their fears, all their unspoken anxieties, all their hidden desires. She was Dorothea, and she was utterly, terrifyingly, magnificently insane. Dorothea, now a fully unleashed force of nature, began shooting at everyone. Her derangement was absolute, her mind a patchwork of delusions, each stitch a twisted justification for her actions. She was raising the stakes with every pull of the trigger, sliding into a pure, unadulterated madness that consumed everything in its path. She was quelling any last vestiges of humanity, her eyes devoid of recognition, even for those she once held dear. The town, already reeling from the pig attack, now faced an internal enemy, a familiar face twisted into a grotesque mask of fury. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder, fear, and the lingering scent of aftershave from a particularly terrified bystander who had just attempted to use a sovereign citizen routine on a cop to get out of a ticket for public urination, only to be met with a hail of bullets. Her first target was the newly repaired call center, a symbol of the town's resilience. She sprayed it with a volley of rounds, the bullets tearing through the bamboo bridge that led to its entrance, sending splinters flying. The floors made of pennies in the lobby exploded upwards, showering terrified employees with copper shrapnel. A particularly unfortunate mulatto fry cook from Frico, who had just finished his shift, was caught in the crossfire, his fried brain cells splattering against a poster advertising a Christian couple's retreat. He was an inch away from death, his life hanging by a tampon string. Dorothea, however, was oblivious, her focus narrowed to a singular destructive purpose. She was killing her past, lying to herself about her motives, and idolizing her own distorted sense of justice. She was moaning with fury, nudging herself further into the abyss, offering a grotesque spectacle of vengeance. Then she turned her attention to the main cast. Young Blood, ever the protector, tried to reason with her, his voice calm amidst the chaos. "Dorothea, stop! This isn't you," he pleaded, but his words were lost in the cacophony of gunfire. Dorothea, seeing only a threat, fired. Youngblood crumpled, a bullet lodged in his chest. He was gone, a major main character, a quiet force of good, extinguished in a flash of deranged fury. His death was a bizarre incident, a senseless act that would forever haunt the survivors. His last thought was of a bird feeder with strange things in it, a memory of a simpler time. Gumbo, witnessing the horror, rushed forward, his usually placid demeanor replaced by a desperate urgency. He tried to disarm her, his hands, usually so gentle, now moving with surprising speed. But Dorothea was too fast, too consumed by her madness. She turned the AK-47 on him, firing a round that tore through his arm, sending him sprawling. He was sent to the ER, an inch away from death, his life hanging by a tampon string, his semen stains on his shirt a testament to the chaos. The sight of his blood, however, did not deter her. It only fueled her rage, a religious ecstasy of destruction. In a fit of destructive rage, she then set fire to the storage shed, the very one that had held the clue to O'Malley's betrayal. The shed, a symbol of hidden truths, erupted in a fiery inferno, its peeling paint curling in the heat. The soft fires and quiet ridge of the bayou were now consumed by her fury, the flames licking at the humid air, casting grotesque shadows that danced like demons. The fire was a breakout scene of her internal turmoil, a physical manifestation of her unraveling mind. She was digging through dumpsters of her own memories, raking up leaves of regret, and throwing battery acid in somebody's face with every bullet she fired. The malmetol of her sanity had evaporated, leaving behind only a bitter, acrid taste. Then, in a moment of twisted clarity, she turned the AK-47 on herself. She placed the barrel against her temple, her finger hovering over the trigger. But for some reason, it didn't work. The gun jammed. Or perhaps she was out of bullets. Or maybe, just maybe, a bizarre, almost divine intervention prevented it. It was a moment both tragic and darkly comedic, highlighting the absurdity of her situation. She was dwelling in despair, but fate, in its infinite perverse wisdom, had other plans. She was underachieving in her suicide attempt, a final pathetic act in a life of escalating madness. Just then Loon and Merrick arrived, their faces grim, their movements purposeful. They carried with them a briefcase filled with legitimate information, a veritable park encyclopedia of truth. They had been working tirelessly, piecing together the fragments of the secret society ruse, which they now revealed to be a fake, a meticulously crafted deception designed to throw them off the trail. The tin-foil hats and pesos of their investigation had finally paid off. The secret society was nothing more than a smokescreen, a dream interpretation gone horribly wrong, a clever misdirection orchestrated by O'Malley and his co-conspirator to cover their tracks. The no-glove, no-love attitude of the real killer was now chillingly clear. And then came the final devastating revelation. Loon presented the irrefutable proof. Dorothea was actually Janet's killer. The bone button, the drain pipe, the arrow, all the clues that had seemed to point to Brigsby or even O'Malley were now recontextualized. Cora's vision of the killer's tattoo, the Mr. Rogers doll and the arrow piercing the weeping eye, was not O'Malley's but Dorothea's. The drug test results from the crime scene, the semen stains analysis, and a report card from a Christian counselor detailing Dorothea's deep-seated resentment and jealousy towards Janet, all pointed to her. It was a story of slavery to her own emotions, a meat plant of festering hatred. The killing, lying, judging, and idolizing of her own twisted narrative were exposed for all to see. The bizarre incident of Janet's death was finally explained, not by some extraterrestrial force, but by the all-too-human darkness lurking within Dorothea's heart. The extraterrestrial nature of the crime was revealed to be deeply human, albeit deranged. The dream interpretation of the past now made horrifying sense. The slavery of her own emotions led to this. The killing, lying, judging, and idolizing of her own twisted narrative are exposed. Dorothea, her face a mask of disbelief, dropped the AK-47. The gun clattered to the ground, a final jarring note in the symphony of her madness. She was apprehended by the police, who, for once, were not trying to use a sovereign citizen routine on a cop to get out of a ticket. They were grim-faced, their usual incompetence replaced by a rare moment of professionalism. She was taken to the mental hospital, a crisis center for the truly broken, her cries echoing through the night. She was a plain Jane no more, her true monstrousness revealed. The town watched in stunned silence, the weight of the truth settling over them like a heavy shroud. The Fry cook who had been shot was now being attended to by a Christian counselor who was trying to explain the concept of forgiveness amidst the chaos. The hidden window box that had held the initial clue now seemed to mock them, its secrets laid bare. The mink that had been found inside was now a symbol of the town's lost innocence. The first stink bug of suspicion had blossomed into a full-blown infestation of truth. The rug burn of their past was now a gaping wound, and they were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered reality. The sock puppet of their innocence had been torn to shreds. The tantrum of Dorothea's rage had left an indelible mark. The bacterial infection of deceit had been exposed. The religious ecstasy of vengeance had consumed one of their own. The colossus of their faith had crumbled. The Ramses of their trust had been betrayed. The executioner had been revealed. The head honcho of their despair had been apprehended. The firing squad of their fears had been disbanded. The AK-47 was silenced. The breakout scene of their despair was over. The tampon string of their sanity had snapped. The tin foil of their delusion was crumpled. The pesos of their goodwill was spent. The pros of living in Saurel were rapidly being outweighed by the cons. The slavery to their own bizarre reality was complete. The meat plants of their nightmares were working overtime. The killing had only just begun. The rug burn of her past was now a gaping wound, and she was ready to tear the world apart to heal it. She was a fry cook in the inferno of her own making, serving up a dish of pure, unadulterated rage. The Frico of her mind was working overtime, churning out new ways to inflict pain. She was a mink in a cage, lashing out at anything that came near. She was the first stink bug of a new plague, a harbinger of doom. She was the sock puppet of her own madness, dancing to a tune only she could hear. She was a tantrum personified, a force of nature unleashed. She was a bacterial infection of the soul, spreading rapidly, consuming everything in its path. She was religious ecstasy gone wrong, a perversion of faith. She was Colossus and Ramses combined, a destructive force of biblical proportions. She was the executioner, the head honcho, the firing squad, all rolled into one. She was the AK-47 itself, a weapon of mass destruction. She was the breakout scene of their despair, the tampon string of their sanity, the tin foil of their delusion, the pesos of their destruction, the prose of their downfall, the patchwork of their broken dreams, the peeling layers of their reality, the vacation house of their peace, the lake house of their sorrow, the Christian couple's retreat of their damnation, the Christian counselor of their despair. She was the embodiment of all their fears, all their unspoken anxieties, all their hidden desires. She was Dorothea, and she was utterly, terrifyingly, magnificently insane. In the aftermath of Dorothea's rampage, Bayou Saint-Mere began the slow, arduous process of healing. The crisis hotline at the newly rebuilt call center, now fortified with a bamboo bridge and a subwoofer that played soothing German sea shanties on a loop, was ringing off the hook. But this time, the calls were different. They were filled with a new sense of purpose, a collective desire to rebuild, to understand, to simply be. The damaged buildings were repaired, not with the pristine uniformity of a suburban development, but with a patchwork of bizarre materials. Salvaged tin from old tin foil hats, colorful pesos embedded in the mortar, and the occasional, inexplicable tampon string woven into the eaves. It was a testament to the town's resilience, a visual representation of their ability to find beauty in the broken, to create something new and vibrant from the ashes of chaos. The peeling layers of deception had been stripped away, revealing a raw, honest core. Loose ends, like stray threads from a particularly unraveling sweater, were slowly being tied. Father O'Malley, exposed as a co-conspirator, vanished into the humid night, leaving behind only a trapdoor in the floor of the church banquet hall and a ladder leading into the attic of unanswered questions. The eyes gouged out from Cora's vision were revealed to be a metaphor for willful blindness, a collective refusal to see the darkness lurking beneath the surface of their seemingly idyllic town. The bird feeder with strange things in it was finally cleaned out, its contents replaced with organic, locally sourced birdseed, a small but significant step towards normalcy. The extraterrestrial nature of the previous incidents was now understood to be deeply human, albeit deranged. The dream interpretation of the past now made horrifying sense, a tapestry woven from the threads of their collective unconscious. Cora, now a full-fledged remote viewer, embraced her new abilities with a quiet dignity. Her apartment, though still a mall of the grotesque, became a place of quiet wisdom, a quiet ridge in the storm. She offered dream interpretation services, her insights proving eerily accurate, helping the townsfolk navigate the labyrinthine corridors of their own subconscious. She even used her powers to find lost raffle tickets for the annual Sand Castle competition, much to the delight of the local children. Her visions, once a source of confusion, were now a guiding light, a testament to the power of the unseen. She was a Christian counselor of the subconscious, a GED graduate of the spiritual realm, her wisdom far surpassing any report card. Chaos and supamakleketa masikapakadena puputiti kaka Jones. Their love story a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. Continued their courtship. They were often seen at the local seafood restaurant, sharing shrimp gumbo and discussing the philosophical implications of fried brain cells. Supamaklekato masikapakadina puputiti kaka's secret, it turned out, was wonderfully mundane. She was secretly a fry cook at the Frykel fast food joint on the outskirts of town, a fact she had kept hidden due to her fear of being judged for her less-than-academic pursuits. Her collection of sock puppet memorabilia, a vast and disturbing array of felt and yarn, was also revealed, adding another layer of quirky charm to her already formidable personality. Their love, a testament to the power of acceptance, was a no-glove, no-love kind of affair. Passionate and unapologetic. The Kathy comics they read together were now filled with a new, shared humor, their laughter echoing through the night. Brigsby, still battling his cancer cells, found a strange form of peace in his final days. He was often seen in the park, a one-man band playing mournful German sea shanties on a kazoo and a washboard, his pot-belly pigs, now domesticated and surprisingly well-behaved, rooting gently at his feet. He even attended a Christian counselor session, where he confessed his lifelong obsession with aftershave and his secret desire to be a short-order cook. He was attempting to write his memoirs on tin foil with a tampon string as a pen, his prose a bizarre blend of scientific jargon and existential dread. His ending was darkly comedic, a final, defiant act of absurdity in a life defined by it. He found a strange form of religious ecstasy in his impending demise, a profound sense of quelling his earthly desires, dwelling in the moment and raising his spirits. He was sliding into eternity, turning towards the light, and underachieving in his attempts to be a villain. He was voting for peace, crouching in humility, and diving into the unknown. He was eating his last meal with gratitude, fooling no one, gathering his thoughts, and honoring his bizarre life. Bayou St. Mere, having faced its darkest hour, emerged scarred but not broken. The town, in its own peculiar way, was healing. A new sense of community blossomed, a vibrant, chaotic tapestry woven from shared trauma and resilient hope. The White Russian was flowing freely at the newly reopened church banquet hall, and a new bamboo bridge was being built, symbolizing new connections, new beginnings. The floors made of pennies in the new town hall represented their ability to rebuild from nothing, each coin a testament to their collective resilience. The mulatto community, the plain Jane folks, everyone found a new sense of unity, a shared understanding that transcended their differences. The aftershave of normalcy began to settle over Bayou St. Mere, but with the understanding that the bazaar was always just around the corner. The vacation house and lake house were now symbols of peace, not peril, their windows reflecting the hopeful, if slightly askew, future. The Christian couple's retreat was now a place of genuine healing, its attendees finding solace in shared stories and surprisingly good sourdough bread. The Christian counselor was actually helping, her advice surprisingly practical amidst the town's unique challenges. The town was killing its demons, lying to itself no more, judging with compassion, idolizing truth, moaning with joy, nudging towards peace, offering forgiveness, puffing with pride, quelling its fears, dwelling in hope, raising its children, sliding into happiness, turning towards the light, underachieving no more, voting for a better future, crouching in prayer, diving into life, eating with gratitude, fooling no one, gathering strength, and honoring its past. The colossus of their past had been defeated, and the Ramses of their future was yet to be written. The executioner of their fears had been apprehended, and the firing squad of their anxieties had been disbanded. The AK-47 was silenced. The breakout scene of their despair was over. The tampon string of their patience had snapped, but a new, stronger thread was being woven. The tin foil of their delusion was crumpled, but a new, clearer vision was emerging. The pesos of their goodwill were spent, but a new currency of compassion was being minted. The pros of living in Saurel were now clear, outweighing the cons. The patchwork of their lives was stronger for the mending. The peeling layers of deception had been stripped away. The vacation house was happy. The lake house was serene. The Christian couple's retreat was a success. The Christian counselor was effective. The town was killing its demons, lying to itself no more, judging with compassion, idolizing truth, moaning with joy, nudging towards peace, offering forgiveness, puffing with pride, quelling its fears, dwelling in hope, raising its children, sliding into happiness, turning towards the light, underachieving no more, voting for a better future, crouching in prayer, diving into life, eating with gratitude, fooling no one, gathering strength, honoring its past. The Alabaster Almanac closes, for now, on a note of resilient, absurd hope, a testament to the enduring, bizarre spirit of Bayou Saint Mere. The final image is of the town bathed in the golden light of a setting sun, a single, perfectly formed sand castle standing proudly on the banks of the bayou, a symbol of their enduring, if slightly deranged. And somewhere in the distance a pot-belly pig snorts contentedly, a reminder that even in the most absurd of worlds, life, in all its